welcome back to ASEAN in Focus. In the era of ASEAN integration, our companies and businesses need to keep up with the challenges of increasing global competition. One tool to help businesses and companies in the ASEAN region to achieve this is the ASEAN Corporate Governance Scorecard. In 2009, the ASEAN finance ministers endorsed the ASEAN Capital Markets Forum, or ACMF, implementation plan to promote the development of an integrated capital market. This initiative is undertaken in parallel with the efforts to achieve convergence in ASEAN countries by 2015 as an economic community. The ASEAN Corporate Governance Scorecard and the ranking of corporate governance of ASEAN publicly listed companies are among several initiatives under the ACMF. To help us understand the ASEAN Corporate Governance Scorecard, or ACGS, and its importance in this era of ASEAN integration, we are honored to have with us Mr. Ricardo Nicanor Jacinto, the Chief Executive Officer of the Institute of Corporate Directors, or ICD, which is the domestic ranking body for the ACGS under the auspices of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Good afternoon, sir, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Nea. Pleased to be here.
Yes, sir. Sir, to give us a background, can you please tell us what is the uniqueness of the ASEAN region in terms of businesses and corporate governance?
Well, the ASEAN region is really a hotbed of economic activity. In 2010, it had a combined GDP of $2.3 trillion, and that is meant to grow to $10 trillion by the year 2020. So I doubt that if there's any other region in the world right now who can boast that sort of growth. So this is the exciting part of the world where economic activity is taking place. At the same time, if you put all the economies together in ASEAN, that would total the 7th largest world economy. So there are a lot of things happening insofar as ASEAN, and I think it's very important that governance is being highlighted in this region.
So there's one thing, sir, the ASEAN Corporate Governance Scorecard. Why is it important, sir? First, what is Corporate Governance Scorecard, and why is it important?
Well, the corporate governance, if I may just take a step back, is really the way that companies are run. In the same way that public governance is the way that public entities are run. Corporate governance refers to the way that corporations are run, particularly by the board of directors and the CEO. And so a scorecard which takes a look at the performance, the actual performance of a company vis-a-vis best practices in the region is very important, because it will show us, first of all, the gaps between what is actually happening on the ground and what should be happening insofar as best companies in the region are practicing governance.
So it's basically the mechanism being used by these companies in running their respective companies.
Yes, the practices, the policies, and the culture.
Sir, I've read that the scorecard of the publicly listed companies in the Philippines is improving year to year. Where do we base this, and what caused these improvements?
Okay. Well, the scorecard, if I may, the scorecard is based on a list of 209 questions, which in essence focuses on 5 key areas that the Organization of Economic Cooperating Countries and Development are focusing on, or the OECD. And these categories are rights of shareholders, equitable treatment of minority shareholders, stakeholder, disclosure and transparency, and the role of the board. So these 209 questions are based on those 5 broad categories. And by reckoning the practice, the actual practice of companies vis-a-vis these best practices, we can get a sense of whether the company is well governed, what sort of areas it needs to address, and the like. So that's where the scorecard comes from. And it's important because, again, you know, if we look at ourselves, we think that we have a tendency to say, well, things are going great, you know, why change, etc. But when we look at our other neighbors, especially, for example, the Thais, the Singaporeans, who have much more efficient and globally dominating companies, then we can also see, look, you know, if we want to get to that point for our companies, then we also have to try to see how they do it, and the scorecard gives us a good way of gauging that.
So after getting the scorecards of these companies, what's the next step? Like, you tell them these are the things that you need to improve, or what happened next after that?
Right. Well, the scorecard comes about because first the domestic ranking body in the Philippines, that's us, we get the top 100 publicly listed companies by market capitalization. Okay? So with that, we then get their scores, and then we aggregate and average that. So that's where the score comes from, no? And our score, as you mentioned earlier, has been steadily improving. And the idea is, of course, to continue to raise that score, but I think more importantly for the companies is to see what they can pick up from the region and use it to better themselves. No? So we tell a lot of the companies, don't get fixated on the scores, much like you don't want kids to be too grade conscious.
Yes.
But we want them to say, look, learn from it and see what you can adapt to improve your operations here in the Philippines. And so that's what we really want to come
and
across.
other economic reforms that they can
Right,
apply
right.
in that. But sir, there are other companies na it hasn't been reached by these economic reforms. What can we do about this?
Well, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, when you teach someone something, they may or may not agree to take it. You can't spoon feed it to them. You certainly can't force feed them. And so we put it out there for them to adapt or not. And change is very uncomfortable for many companies and people. So, you know, unfortunately we see some companies that don't want to change, that feel that they're happy where they are and they, you know, business as usual is fine. And that's their choice. But what we're saying is, look, if you want to move ahead, these are the competition you're up against, these other companies in the region, and this is how they do business. And if you want to be able to compete, maybe you can learn a thing or two from their book, and vice versa. They can also learn from us. So that's really what it's all about.
So it's really very important, especially that the ASEAN integration is coming up by the end of this
Definitely.
year. Sir, what do you think should the ASEAN region prepare for? What should the Philippines prepare for with the ASEAN integration?
Well, I think the ASEAN region, many of the neighbors that I've spoken to have really been preparing for ASEAN integration since 2009, as you mentioned. Unfortunately, some sectors in our economy are not ready. They don't know what it means. They don't know how it will affect them. And so I'm afraid that some of those sectors may face some economic dislocation. On the other hand, there are other sectors that are better prepared for it, especially I think in the banking sector, because the BSP has done a good job of preparing people. And so I think they'll be better adjusted in terms and better prepared to take advantage of the opportunities that this integration will offer.
Sir, what are these sectors that you think are not yet prepared for the integration?
Well, no, I don't want to say it, but I mean, let's just look at sectors where the Philippines is uncompetitive vis-a-vis our neighbors. No? For example, I think in the case of agriculture, world sugar prices are in general, half the level of our sugar prices. And so we have to be prepared once the tariffs, once the integration is open. Can we compete on that basis? So we will have to see.
Sir, you've mentioned there are sectors that are ready and there are sectors that are not yet ready for the integration. In general, sir, do you think the Philippines is ready for the integration?
Well, I don't feel I'm qualified to answer that question, Nea, unfortunately, because I don't have a bird's eye view of the economy. Maybe the NEDA people would be or the DTI people would be in a better position to answer that question. But from my point of view, in the case of governance, I think that we've been doing quite well, as been demonstrated by the increase in our country scores. And I think once the scores for 2015 are released, we'll see if we're in a better position to compete vis-a-vis the rest of our neighbors.
When will that be released, sir?
Actually, it will be released on November 14th. This November 14th, the ASEAN Capital Markets Forum is releasing the list of top 50 ASEAN publicly listed companies insofar as the corporate governance scorecard is concerned. And then we'll have a good gauge of whether we've done well there or not relative to our neighbors. So, you know, I invite everybody who's interested to come to register on the event website at www.aseancorpgov.com.
So it's really important for them to join that, to
to see.
make a good website then, so you can gauge
Yeah,
really
we have a very
how-
good event or website.
And you have other, I've read that you have other activities coming up this November. You have
Yes.
like there's a series of forums and
Yes,
other
yes.
things.
ICD is a non-profit. We're dedicated to the advocacy of good corporate governance. We've been doing this for the last 16 years. And we always have a range of activities and events in which we promote good governance. So this November, on November 6th, we have the chairman of the International Internal Auditors Association coming to speak to us. Of course, we have this November 14th event with the ASEAN and several other activities. This happens on a monthly basis.
All right, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Nea.
And that's Mr. Ricardo Nicanor Jacinto, the Chief Executive Officer of the Institute of Corporate Directors. And that is the latest news in the Southeast Asian nations. Stay updated with the ASEAN region. I'm Nea Mangawang, and I'm 1 for 25.